Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
It's never too early to set expectations and goals for your child's education. The UA College Savings Plan provides opportunities that can help you reach your educational savings goals. Save in Alaska. Study anywhere. There is more information available by calling 1-888, the number 4, and then Alaska. This message sponsored by the UA College Savings Plan.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
The National Weather Service.
Good Thursday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 8th of October. As always, we encourage you and your community to stay safe and informed about the weather coming your way by going to weather.gov/Alaska or arh.noaa.gov. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391, and you can write down that number and use it again and again. It is free. The National Weather Service is on Facebook at NWS Alaska. You'll find more information about the impacts of the now post-tropical system that we were formerly calling OHO. That is moving out and away from the Hawaiian Islands as of last night and is bearing down on southeastern Alaska tonight. You'll find information on Twitter there as well, especially from NWS Juneau tonight using the hashtag AKwx. We'll get you even further. And YouTube, of course, you can find your daily afternoon map briefings there and so much more. Here's a look at the situation now for southeastern Alaska. The red areas are under high wind warnings, and you can see that includes Sitka and points southward tonight. Many areas in the marine zones there are also either under storm force wind warnings, and there could be hurricane force wind gusts at least as we head into late tonight and very early tomorrow, especially around the Clarence Strait and the outer marine areas there as the storm system moves just along the outer coast and continues its trek north and west. Let's get in on some of the specifics. The wind gust forecast through Saturday around Ketchikan. These are the highest maximum gusts predicted at this point, and they certainly could go stronger than that, but as of the latest forecast information available, this is where we think the strongest gusts may be around Ketchikan. That could approach 60 miles per hour. Around Sitka, those could approach 90 miles per hour on the outer coast there. So some of the stronger winds probably right along the central outer coast and also in some of the southern inner channels there around Clarence Strait. Again, some of those winds will be considerably stronger than probably anywhere else in southern southeast. Now look at the wave heights, and you can see the colors quickly bleed into the oranges and the reds, and we're talking about waves that are at least 20 to 30 feet. There probably will be some higher individual waves, but this would be the averaging of that, especially south of Cross Sound and into the areas around Sitka and point southward toward the Dixon entrance. So this would be the maximum wave height through Saturday there. The worst of that will have been passed through by Friday afternoon and evening. The marine wind forecast shows the higher winds there again south as you head out and away from Port Alexander and point southward toward the Dixon entrance. Most of the higher seas will be out along the outer coast, of course, and the wind speeds there around 60 to 70 miles an hour sustained. And again, that would be the outer coast. And then the precipitation is also going to be an issue here, especially for southern parts of southeast. You can see the colors showing ranges anywhere from 5 to as high as 7 or more inches of rainfall, and some of that may also redevelop north of Gustavus as you head north and west of Juneau too. There may be some higher areas of precipitation, but even that alone, even if you take away some of these bullseyes of purple, you're still talking about rainfall amounts that are 2 to maybe 4 inches in general, even around Yakutat and southward. So it's going to be a lot of rain, a lot of wind, and high seas. So all that combined, if you are under those high wind warnings or you have a boat or even a ship moored out around the outer coast south of Sitka in any of these inner channels, and especially around Clarence Strait and around Ketchikan to Annette. Tonight would be a really good time to look at your situation and think, how is this going to move when strong southeasterly winds start roaring in here later tonight and early tomorrow? Now's the time to make those preparations. In fact, I'll give you a pass. Stop watching the show and go take care of your stuff. If you've got loose things out there in the yard or maybe on the beach, it would be a really good idea to move those things in closer, tuck them in, tie them down, and again, think about your situation. Give yourself a few extra minutes tonight before it gets dark to make those preparations so that you don't have surprises or worse, property loss, or even worse, life loss because you didn't plan ahead tonight. So take that extra time tonight and do what you can. Now, a lot of this is going to pass through very quickly. We're going to turn our attention very quickly back to the west here, and this is actually a remnant typhoon, Choi Wan, as it moves toward the southern parts of the Kamchatka Peninsula. This is going to be sheared apart, and a lot of the moisture is going to be moving into the northern Pacific. We still have an area of low pressure out across the Bering Sea that is quickly falling apart. It's sitting there and spinning and dragging in a lot of dry air, but the main player is the low pressure system in the Gulf of Alaska that's here already. This is not the tropical remnant Oho that is dragging that system northward right now. So we already have low pressure south of Kodiak Island. It has been bringing some strong and gusty winds through southern parts of south central, around the Cook Inlet region to Barren Islands and Kodiak Island. And a lot of that energy already is sitting right along the coast, and that already brought rain to parts of southeast with over 3.5 inches in places like Ketchikan there. So you're already primed as far as wet weather goes. Now, as this system kind of wraps around here, it's going to stay put and stay as a somewhat interesting weather player in all of this. We're dragging up more moisture, and with the jet stream oriented from northwest down here south of the Aleutians, and it goes off the screen and then right back up here, that's pushing that system that is Oho right into southeastern Alaska, and we'll curve that back around. As that happens, we're going to see that kind of reabsorbed in this overall area of low pressure that is right under that upper level low pressure system that you'll see in the jet stream map here in just a minute. It'll all come together in a really beautiful picture, I hope, as long as I did my maps right today. All right, so here's a look one more time. That southwesterly flow coming into southeast Alaska. The clouds will zip in there tonight. Winds are going to pick up pretty rapidly tonight. So like I said, if you haven't made preparations already, now would be a really good time to do that because things are going to change pretty quickly for southern parts of southeast as we go into the nighttime hours. Here's the current weather situation. This is not Oho. That is way south off your screen. The frontal boundary right now is sitting all the way from the Alaska Peninsula, south central to southeastern Alaska. Here's the triple point. This usually has a lot more rain in it. And this is working northward. For most of the interior, things are pretty dry. You've had some patchy cloud cover from time to time. North of the Brooks Range, it's a little bit cooler with high pressure in command. There's a snow shower across the Chukchi Seacoast today. But really most of the weather is right across south central and southwestern Alaska where things are pretty breezy. In the low south and west of the Pribilofs is really not much to write home about. You can see all the dry air and the very ragged cloud structure there in the visible satellite picture earlier today. Pretty, but not very potent this afternoon. Now, as we look at tonight, already this is what's left of Oho, down to 970 millibars. The frontal boundary will work up towards Sitka and work very close to Haida Gwaii. So there's going to be some stronger southeasterly winds, and when those southeast winds pick up, they're going to stay strong for a good part of the daytime tomorrow. So once again, high wind warnings are posted for southern parts of southeast starting at about daybreak tomorrow, well, even earlier than that, around 7 o'clock in the morning for many locations. And those winds could come up to about 60 to 80 miles per hour with their stronger gusts. Not everyone's going to see that, but if you're in one of those spots, it gets a really channeled wind sometimes, especially a north to south or even a little bit more southeasterly channel, you're going to have some stronger wind gusts through the day. Now, as we go into the afternoon tomorrow, the low pressure system should deepen very quickly to 958 millibars. That is a very strong change for you. Look for that periods of heavy wind and some heavy rain with that as this system continues to back to the north and west. So again, this is going to be just offshore of Sitka and in the eastern Gulf. And again, that's going to bring a lot of wind through the region. Throughout the day, you're going to gradually see a progression from the winds from the south and east to more of a southerly direction. Once that shift moves a little bit more to the south, the wind should start to ease up a little bit. So there will be a progression throughout the day where you get big ramping up of wind from the south and east and gradually becoming more southerly, and then those winds should gradually subside throughout the end of the day and into the evening hours tomorrow. But there will be a period of very heavy wind and rain passing through. By Saturday, this system has been reabsorbed into the overall larger circulation under the jet stream level low and with the low pressure system out across the western Gulf, back to 977 millibars. So that warmer air then is starting to make a comeback from the south and the west. That's going to squeeze more rain out across southeast and south central. And then north of the Alaska range, well, it probably will be breezy at times, and you'll see some passing clouds, but conditions should be pretty dry for you. There may be some showers out across the Bering and across the Alaska range and as well as the Aleutians, but generally things look pretty dry out across the west, and even high pressures starting to develop south of Shemya there. So this is Saturday. Things will change for the better very quickly as we get into Saturday morning for parts of southeast, but again, tomorrow looks to be windy, wet, and possibly dangerous, so be careful out there, especially in southern, southeast, and along the coast. Now, this is what happened today. Temps were back in the mid to upper 50s for most of southeast. Record highs set in parts of southeast yesterday. A very warm day there. Haines and Skagway in the lower 50s. Juneau around 54, about 56 in Sitka, with upper 50s for places like Ketchikan, Annette, Craig, and Klawock. 54 in Hyder today, 52 in Yakutat. About the same there in Cordova and Valdez. Lower 50s for you. Homer and Seward also pleasantly mild. 49 in Kenai. In fact, Homer, let me get that right. It was almost 60 degrees there today. 50 in Anchorage, 50 in Talkeetna, mid to upper 30s for areas in the Matanuska Valley. 39 in Gulkana, 33 in Northway. Eagle saw 38. Fairbanks had a mild day at almost 50 degrees, 32 around Fort Yukon, only 14 over Anaktuvuk Pass, and 25 for Arctic Village. Most of the Arctic coast only in the mid-20s this afternoon, 30s and 40s for Kotzebue Sound. Kivalina showing 36 degrees, 42 in Kotzebue, 44 for Nome, and 41 in St. Lawrence Island. For southwestern Alaska, we saw temps in the 40s and 50s. Lake Iliamna was in the upper 50s today. King Salmon and Dillingham both in the lower to mid 50s. Kodiak Island in the lower 50s and 40s for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint, Cold Bay, False Pass, all in the upper 40s today. 46 for St. George and about the same in St. Paul this afternoon, as well as the central Aleutians with Atka at 48 and almost 50 degrees in Shemya this afternoon. Now, overnight lows will stay in the single digits and teens for the Brooks Range and north of the Yukon Valley, especially in the upper valley. For most of the central and western parts of the Yukon and Alaska, we're talking about temperatures that are just at or above freezing. South central in the lower 40s tonight, upper 40s for the Bristol Bay region, Kodiak Island, and the Alaska Peninsula. Southeast, very mild as that wind builds in. Look for lows only in the lower to mid 50s. Some places hold near 60 degrees overnight with high temperatures tomorrow, not changing very much as that warm and wet air moves northward quickly. Look for Prince William Sound temps tomorrow to be in the mid-40s to lower 50s, 52 in Kodiak, mid-40s for the middle Tanana Valley and Fairbanks and Tanana as well. Around the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range, Ambler and Bettles, you're looking at temps at or above freezing, but just barely tomorrow. The Arctic coast in the upper 20s for most, Barrow and Prudhoe Bay included. 42 in Nome, Southwest in the 40s and low 50s for Bristol Bay. Sandpoint 51 and upper 40s for the central and western chain. Now, hot flying weather tomorrow not only will have trouble with visibility, but certainly some severe turbulence across southeastern Alaska and the Gulf. For south central, not expecting too many problems with visibility, but you'll run back into MVFR south of St. Lawrence Island to Nunivak Island to the central chain and throughout most of the Alaska Peninsula through the afternoon and just offshore of most of the Arctic coast through the afternoon on Friday. Your pass conditions, VFR is expected for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass through the day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should see improvements during your afternoon hours. Rainy Pass expected to be VFR. Windy Pass should also be visual throughout the day. Isabel Pass, we expect to see VFR conditions there. Mentasta Pass, MVFR transitioning to VFR conditions throughout the day. Tanita Pass right now looks pretty good as far as visibility goes. Portage Pass should see some improvements during the day. And then as we get into Chilkoot and White Pass, you would expect IFR, and that's exactly what we have. Freezing levels show that surface freezing line still holding fairly north right now. The warmer air aloft is spreading northward into Kotzebue Sound, where levels are as high as 4,000 feet tomorrow morning and as high as 6,000 to 10,000 feet across southeastern Alaska. Bristol Bay ranging from 4,000 to 6,000 feet, and warmer air is trying to build in south of the Aleutian chain by the weekend. Icing potential shows levels that are pretty high up there with warm and wet air building in. That makes sense. Look for a light to isolated moderate in some cases and maybe some occasional to widespread moderate north and south of most of southeastern Alaska. On the western side of this weather system is some colder air and certainly some moisture. Most of those levels to really get into significant icing would be around 6,000 to 9,000 feet and higher. You'll find some light to isolated moderate, maybe even occasional moderate on that western fringe of the storm. Now here's the jet stream. Remember, we were talking about that low pressure system aloft. This is it, and this is what's driving this entire circulation right now. So we have a very broad and well enhanced northwesterly flow. It's digging well into the central Pacific. It has reached down and grabbed the tropical remnants of Oho and has slung them towards southeast, and that is why that forward motion of the storm is picking up, and that's what's going to help it turn into more of an extratropical system sitting in the Gulf of Alaska with such power and force tonight and tomorrow, and then it gets reabsorbed into the overall circulation by Saturday and Sunday. So a lot of changes happening very quickly across the Gulf of Alaska, and southeast is going to be very close to that as it happens. For the 9,000-foot winds, we have that broad southerly flow working across a large part of southeast. Those wind speeds pick up from 35 knots south of Sitka tomorrow to as high as 50 to 70 knots coming in over Haida Gwaii. Look for east and northeasterly winds across the interior. Those winds around 25 to 35 knots, and northerlies for the Aleutians. Those winds continue at 20 knots there, and about the same for 3,000 feet. Our trough of low pressure across the north and western Gulf, again enhancing that flow in from the south and west, feeding moisture and storm energy into southeast and keeping the winds going pretty well as well. 50 to 70 knots in most areas there, so not a great flying day at all. Look for that broad sweeping easterly flow across the interior to hold around 25 to 30 knots, but as far as coastal areas of south central Alaska, those wind speeds could be as high as 50 knots coming over parts of the Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, and over Kodiak Island. So may not be such great flying weather, even though the core of the storm is a little bit further out over the Gulf. So with all that put together, turbulence, of course, is going to be at a probably a widespread premium for most of southeast tomorrow, isolated to even occasional severe probably with this. We're talking about winds from 70 to 80 mile an hour gusts, maybe even higher out over some of the open water. So below 8,000 feet, don't expect a smooth ride at all tomorrow for the eastern Gulf. For south central, don't be surprised to see this area of isolated moderate, probably extending a little bit further north toward the Kenai Peninsula during the afternoon. Some chop over the Alaska Peninsula, of course, and the Aleutians below 4,000 feet, and also over the Brooks Range, where the pressure gradient remains pretty tight there. There may be some gusts through the gaps and passes as you get through your day there and over the Bering Strait. Let's look at your aviation forecast. We'll be back with your marine weather and another look at the surface weather charts for southeast tomorrow. Stay tuned.
Planets before sunrise. Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dean Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. Hey, James, what do you call a grouping of 3 planets in the sky?
A conjunction? Oh boy, there's a conjunction coming. There's a conjunction coming.
All right, wait. Hold on. Stop the music. This week, the planets won't be super close together, but they'll be in the same area and all, but more like in a planet clump.
Planet traffic jam?
Exactly. And to add to the congestion, the brightest star in Leo the Lion will be hanging around, and the moon will crash through this weekend.
Ooh, let's check it out. What can I say? I love conjunctions. Anyway, we have our sky set up for Sunday morning, October 8th at 6 a.m. looking east. Wow, you weren't kidding about the planet clump. Look at all that.
I thought you'd like it. We have 3 planets, 1 bright star, and a slim waning crescent moon all lined up within 17 degrees of sky.
And you even got up early in the morning to see it.
Yes, I set my alarm, but don't expect me to dance.
Okay, so what do we have? The brightest planet must be Venus, our dazzling sister planet. No other star-like object is brighter from Earth.
Yep. And the blue-white star next to Venus is Regulus, the heart of the constellation Leo the Lion. Venus and Regulus will be in conjunction on the mornings of October 8th and 9th and appear less than 3 degrees apart.
Lower in the sky, that other bright light must be the planet Jupiter, largest planet in our solar system.
You got it. And that faint little thing above Jupiter, if you look at it really carefully, may look a little red.
That's Mars. Wow, what a star-planet-moon clump. The planets may look close together, but they're not. When we look down on our solar system from outer space this week, you can see where the planets really lie. From our rotating and revolving observatory we call Earth, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter appear clumped, But Venus is about 52 million miles from Earth this week, Mars is almost 220 million miles away, and Jupiter is a whopping 580 million miles.
That's nothing. Regulus, that bright star that is also in our clump, is 77.63 light years away from Earth. That is 456 trillion. 357 billion, 700 million, 767,114 miles.
And 3 feet. But who's counting?
Okay, we're back on the Earth in the good old US of A on the morning of October 8th again. But our clump gets even more intriguing when we fast forward time to October 9th at 6 a.m.
The moon has shifted in its orbit around the Earth and appears between Venus and Jupiter, and not far from Mars.
Sweet. But alas, it is only temporary. On the morning of the 10th, the moon will be an even slimmer waning crescent and hang just above the eastern horizon at 6 a.m. Okay, I have one more surprise.
Okay, what is it?
As the morning rolls on and the sun is just about to rise, look really low in the sky. You just might be able to make out the elusive planet Mercury among the rosy fingers of dawn.
Nice. And what happens if we go one more morning into the future? Well, on October 11th, look, the moon is just a thumbnail sliver of light, and it will appear super close to Mercury. What a great week to wake up early. So there you have it, a planet clump if I ever saw one. We'll have Venus next to the star Regulus,
Jupiter next to Mars,
and the moon revolving through on Sunday and Monday morning.
Plus, don't forget to try and find minuscule Mercury just before sunrise. You know, James, we got a lot of fan mail about your dancing during the last conjunction.
Really?
Some people wondered if you had a new nervous tic or maybe you had to go to the space bathroom.
Huh.
But most people really dug your moves.
Ooh. So can I dance again for this planet clump?
Well, give the people what they want.
It's all there when you keep looking up.
I have to say something about Carlton. I don't know what else to say there. Okay, no, I'm not going to dance for you. Here's a look at southeast, and the winds obviously the highlight of this forecast as we go into Friday. The winds are going to pick up quickly tonight. High wind warnings are in effect for areas south of Sitka and along the Clarence Strait for wind gusts that could exceed 60 to 80 miles per hour. Higher gusts to 90 are expected out here in some of the marine areas. There are sustained winds at 65 knots, so storm force winds at least, and there could be some areas that see some hurricane force winds at top. Look for 16-foot seas there inside of Clarence Strait, 26-foot seas on the outer marine areas there, close to places like Craig and south of Sitka, where the wind speeds could be in from the south and east at 50 knots, 23-foot seas there. Southeasterlies coming up through Stevens Passage, 40 knots with an 8-foot sea. Northerlies inside of the Lynn Canal responding with 35 knots and 7-foot seas, and northeasterlies a little bit further up the coast. Now, when I say things are going to improve quickly on Saturday, look at this. Much better, right? Everything goes down. The winds diminish, the seas diminish. You're looking at northwesterlies to Clarence Strait, 20 knots with a 6-foot sea, 15-knot winds outside of the Dixon entrance. A south and southwesterly flow only at 20 knots on the outer coast. Southerlies in the Lynn Canal and northerlies in Stevens Passage, both of those around 15 to 25 knots on Saturday. Friday's going to be a tough day. It will go through, and Saturday will be better. For South Central, look for a northeasterly wind coming down Cook Inlet, becoming easterly, crossing through the Barren Islands at 30 knots there. 30 knots inside of Shelikof Strait. Much better day there tomorrow than what we saw today. And northerlies coming out of Resurrection Bay. 40 knots with an 11-foot sea, light northeasterlies inside of Prince William Sound at 10 knots, becoming easterly and 15 knots for Saturday. A southeast wind picks up to 20 knots for the north and western Gulf, 25 knots from the southeast of Kodiak Island, and easterlies crossing Cook Inlet and most of Shelikof Strait at 10 to 20 knots there, with 2 to as high as 5-foot seas west of the Barren Islands. Now for the Alaska Peninsula and Bristol Bay, you're looking at 25 to 30 knots on the Bering Sea side. You could see seas from 7 to 10 feet, 10-foot seas on the Pacific side, with southeasterlies from Castle Cape to Chignik at 30 knots and northwesterlies from Sand Point to Falls Pass also at 30 knots. again with a 10-foot sea there. For Saturday, look for more of a north and easterly flow to set in on the Pacific coast, becoming northerly a little bit further down towards Sand Point and King Cove. Northwesterlies around the Bering Sea coast. Northerlies remain light inside of Bristol Bay at 10 knots with a 3-foot sea. North and westerly winds for the chain. You're looking at 25 to 30 knots all areas, one exception south of Unalaska and Nikolsky with a 10-foot sea and 35-knot winds there. For Saturday, look for more of a west and northwesterly flow from Kiska to Attu and Adak, 20 to 30 knots there with a 12 to 14-foot sea, and up to 17-foot seas between Nikolsky and Atka, 16-foot seas on the Pacific side for Saturday. For the west coast, northerlies coming over St. Lawrence Island, a little shift there out of the Kuskokwim Bay from the north and east at 25 knots. 7-foot seas expected there. 11-foot seas come up to 14-foot seas for the Pribilofs as winds become northwesterly on a 35-knot flow. Northerlies still crossing St. Lawrence Island at 25 knots with a 9-foot sea. And for the North Slope, freezing spray is still an issue there. Look for east and northeasterlies coming across the Arctic coast. 35 to 40-knot wind coming around the Chukchi seacoast with seas coming up to 8 to 12 feet. More of a broader easterly flow for Saturday, 25 to 35 knots all areas, one exception outside of Kotzebue Sound, a northeasterly wind at 20 knots with a 6-foot sea. And again, watch out for freezing spray. Recapping tonight's weather, the weather will change quickly across southern parts of southeast as low pressure deepens rapidly, moving up the outer coastline tonight. By tomorrow, a 958 millibar low west of Sitka will bring some very strong winds through. Once again, as the southeasterly winds ramp up, those gusts could exceed 60 to 80 miles per hour in some cases in central and southern parts of southeast along the outer coast and the inner channels. Places like Ketchikan, Sitka, Craig, Klawock, Cake, you're probably looking at some very stronger winds. But as the winds diminish, they'll become more southerly in direction, and things will get better very quickly by Saturday as that low pressure system is reabsorbed into the overall circulation of the western parts of the Gulf. Plan for wind, some very heavy waves and surf, and again some very strong gusts throughout the day, as well as heavy rain through parts of southeast tomorrow. Stay tuned. See you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.